Hi, welcome everybody to the National Down Syndrome Society's webinar series. My name is Vanessa Quick. I'm the Director of Educational Programming, and today we've got an excellent follow-up to our technology series with Professor Sean Smith of University of Kansas on transitioning with technology. First, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on the National Down Syndrome Society's website following the presentation. So if you'd like to refer back to it, please do. That'll be at www.ndss.org. All attendees are currently muted. If you have a question at any point, please feel free to type that into the box on your screen. We'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Sean Smith. Sean, do you see that pop up? Oh, there we go. We can see your screen. Thanks so much for being here. Take it away.
Well, great. And Vanessa, and first of all, thank you for that introduction. And looks like we have a nice group, a manageable group today. I want to make sure I'm seeing my GoToWebinar control panel. Is that blocking anything, Vanessa, or is that clear for you?
Looks good to me.
Good. Okay. So welcome, everybody. I'm excited. This is a follow-up to something we did a couple weeks ago. And for those of us that are with me from last time, I will definitely get to the apps. For those of us that are with me for the first time, my goal today is multiple different things. I want to cover a broad area that we'll reference as transition. And I want to do it thinking about a number of different technologies. I have a slide that you see right now that's a QR code as well as a website address right below that QR code. And I'm not going to take the time for QR codes today. Those of us that know how to use it, use it. Those of us that don't, that web address that starts with a GOO, that's actually, don't put www, just simply type in the goo.gl and those numbers and letters, those characters. That will get you to a resource list that I provided that will include the presentation as well as a number of other links. And actually, I'm going to go back to that Google Doc. It's a Google Doc. I'm going to go back to that Google Doc later on when we talk about apps. And so let me kind of set us up for today. What I want to focus on today is this area of transition and the number of different tools that are out there to assist us as we're thinking about transition. Now, many of us may be thinking transition when it applies to transition from secondary to post-secondary. While I'll concentrate on that, I will reference elements that to me are experiences transition from, yes, I won't focus so much on birth to 3 to 5, but that to me is a significant transition. Or transitioning from ages 3 to 5 services to elementary, that's a significant transition. Elementary to middle, significant transition. Middle to secondary or high school, significant transition. Now, that's a lot of geography to cover in an hour. So I'll try to target some examples that are prior to the transition from secondary to post-secondary, although some of the examples I'll offer will also be to that secondary to post-secondary. So a number of different things to go on. The outcome for me, though, is that you're more equipped with this area of what tools are out there to assist individuals with Down syndrome, particularly as the development of independence or self-determination skills, but also what tools are out there for us as parents, as service providers, as other stakeholders that are supporting individuals with Down syndrome. What tools are out there for us when it comes to this area of transition? And so that's what I'll try to do. And one last comment as we get started, a little bit about who I am. As Vanessa shared, I'm a faculty member here at the University of Kansas in the Department of Special Education, but I'm also a parent. I actually have a sophomore in high school with Down syndrome who we've been thinking about transition, and some of you are thinking, oh, a sophomore in high school, he's 16. You've probably been thinking about transition for the last couple of years. Well, that's true, but in all honesty, I've been talking transition since Nolan's been 3. And if you went back to some of the IEP teams that we served on and talked to those educators, they'd be like, yeah, Sean did bring up transition when he was 3 or 4. And I believe a strong advocate that we need to always be thinking about transition. And I'll lead in with that. And why should we be thinking about that transition, that post-secondary transition, with that example, when the child's 3 or 4? Well, my argument is that the educators that we're going to be working with and the other stakeholders we work with, they'll be thinking about that year, or maybe even the next 6 to 8 or 9 months. They're not thinking about the global tasks that individual needs to develop when it comes to be from 3 when they get to be 21, and that's our job. That's what we're thinking about as a parent. So anyways, I'll bring that up. Before I further begin, of course, I lead with technology, and I do mention I have Nolan, but we also have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So there you go. So as we get started, one of the first things I'd like to share with you is thinking about technologies in general. And I'm going to start off with actually an old technology. It's so old that they've stopped developing this technology, but yet it's still very new, and that this idea of wearable technology, and that's Google Glass. And I'm not sure if you've seen this video. It's about probably 2.5 years old. But as you watch this video, I want you to be thinking about the technologies that we have that are currently with us, that are either wearable or they're on our mobile devices, either our iPads or tablets or our smartphones, that allow us to engage the community in a manner that doesn't require text and reading, and doesn't require some of the cognitive abilities that are often limited amongst my son, Nolan, and other individuals with Down syndrome. So let me have you just watch this, and as you watch it, just think about these individuals with Down syndrome and that connection there about potentially how this technology might be applicable. Oh, and the individual is wearing Google Glasses, to clarify. The individual is actually wearing the glass as they interact with their environment.
Meet me in front of Strand Books at 2. Oh man, really?
Notice the arrows that are appearing.
Hey this guy. Hey you, little guy. Sweet. Remind me to buy tickets for Monsieur Gano tonight. Where's the music section? Oh, yeah, this is it. Is Paul here yet? Hey dude, how's it going?
Want to go check out that new place I was telling you about?
Sure.
This stuff's really good.
Hey, just a second. Cool.
Good to see you again.
Thanks, man.
Got a new place, not so great.
See you, dude. Whoa, cool. Take a photo of this. Share it to my circles. Oh, I'm running late. Music, stop.
Hi, what's up?
Hey,
Hey.
you want to say something cool?
Yeah, sure. Is that a ukulele?
Yep. Okay, here goes.
All right, so I share this technology with you, and some of you are saying, come on, Sean, and yet I want to contextualize it and actually share a story about my own son. So first of all, Google Glass is a technology that is of the family of wearable technologies. So everything we just watched is definitely within our smartphone, and actually beyond our smartphone, because this is an older technology. And what I mean by that is like the map system. And if you watch that, so an individual is walking along, about to hop on the subway, subway's closed, and yet a map pops up, and those arrows were directing the individual where to go. And as many of us interact with Siri in our car, if we take the wrong turn, she'll tell us. And the same with maps. They'll take, you're taking the wrong turn, stop, and refocus, renavigate. So those are technologies that don't require a lot of cognitive abilities beyond being able to listen and then beyond being able to follow that visual, which of course is a learned task. But think about that in terms of the technology and what it's replacing. So as a transition specialist years ago, I worked with individuals when it came to navigating the city bus system. which I swear, if you've taken a look at city bus maps recently, I swear this is what the companies do. We develop the city bus map system, right? We develop the schedules, and then I swear we send them off to a foreign country like India, have them translate it to a different language, and then translate it back, and we lose stuff in the translation. I'm only kidding, but they're very difficult to understand. So instead, we often tend to teach individuals, and I remember working with a number of individuals in the DC area about how to go from bus 61 to take you to work, and then bus 62 takes you home, and maybe you have to go to the center of the city and take the different buses. We worked with job coaches. Getting to and from work was getting to and from the store. It's an independent skill. It's critical to self-determination. But what happens when bus 62 has a flat, or it snows, for goodness sake, or something happens where bus 62 turns into bus 59? Well, they tend not to tell us that. And that's where tools like wearable technologies can replace some of that things that we have to instruct, replace it with more independence, and we're teaching them with that tool. And the last thing there is, actually I'm going to go forward here for just a second, with this idea of wearable technologies. I'll just give you an example with Nolan. So Nolan, my son, several years ago, my mom moved to Lawrence, Kansas. We're in Lawrence, Kansas. It's about a town of 100,000. And Nolan, as a young man, started to interact with his nanny, who's going over there for dinner. And she lives about a minute drive away, about a 15-minute walk. And he's really developed a very nice relationship with my mother. And my mother moved closer to us because of age-related dementia. She's phenomenal in terms of some things, but she's losing her memory and some of her processing. I bring that up because, anyways, I'll get to that in just a moment. So Nolan wanted to not only have dinner with her, but Nolan wanted to have some independence. He was sick and tired of being driven to. He wanted to ride his bike. He wanted to walk. And we were a little wary of that initially, even though it's not too far away. But we said, okay, fine. So it was about this time several years ago that I started breaking down the task. And we live in a long cul-de-sac. And so you walk up the top of the street, take a right, head on down, take another right, and then around another cul-de-sac, and that's where my mother lives. And so I worked with Nolan on that. I developed a number of social narratives. I literally laminated some pictures. We walked through it. We practiced it. We walked along. I mean, he really wanted to be very independent. He was about 13 or 14 at the time. And so it came finally the day where, okay, Nolan, fine. You can go ahead and do this task. And we live about 8 homes from the top of our cul-de-sac. And about the second or third home up, something happened inside the house. I run back in. Nolan's on his way. And there we go. So my wife comes back about 20 minutes later and says, where's Nolan? And I said, well, Nolan went over to my mom's house. And she's like, wow, he finally did that. I said, yeah, well, have you heard from him? I said, well, actually, no, I've been busy. And I think I was with my daughter, Mara. I've been busy with Mara. Well, call over. So I call over to my mom. Now, remember, she has age-related dementia. I call over to my mom, and I say, Mom, is Nolan there? And she's like, no, I haven't seen him. And, of course, my wife's on this side going, well, she doesn't remember things. Have her go through the house. And sure enough, she went through the house. No, he's not in this room. No, he's not in that room. And then finally, my wife's not believing my mother, so I have to get in the car and drive over. And sure enough, I drive over, and Nolan's not there. Now, that's about 30 minutes since he walked over, and I'm getting a little concerned. And my mother lives around a number of ponds. So now Nolan's been taught not to go around the ponds without an adult, but did he go over there? I'm worried about that. And then, of course, there's friends along the way. So next thing you know, about an hour later, I get back home having retraced the steps, knocked on people's doors, went over to the ponds, and there's still no Nolan. Now we're getting a little concerned. And my wife's really getting concerned. So it's like, okay, do we call the police? And some police officers behind us on another cul-de-sac. But before we do that, I start thinking, well, what if Nolan went up to the top of the cul-de-sac and started taking a right? He took a left. Well, he wouldn't have done that right. We practiced that and all that. But sure enough, he took a left. And that left, sadly, about 2 blocks over, there is a large intersection, 65 miles an hour. And then there's some ball fields on the other side. And I'm thinking he didn't do it, but sure enough, he did. And there he is playing with some buddies, totally fine, everything's happy, but I'm just about to lose it with Nolan. But more importantly, and the reason I'm sharing this story, is that I had tried everything I know as a special educator to teach him how to do this. We had practiced it. We had created social narratives. We had created pictures. We walked through everything. And yet, a simple thing of going up to the top of the cul-de-sac and turning the wrong way led to some dangerous situations, as well as leading him to not to get there at all. So what am I going to do? Well, of course, then I started thinking about that device that he could wear in his pocket, carry in his pocket, and use as a map that would walk him through, because it had a map on the system, his mobile device, and it would walk him to my mother's house, and then when he got to my mother's house, that mobile device would turn into a phone, and he could actually call on his iPhone, and that's exactly what we did. Now, I share that because, to me, I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have the wearable device, or, excuse me, in this instance, the mobile device. I don't know what else I could have taught him. I'm not sure if we would have had to wait for a maturity level. The effectiveness, I don't know, and the efficiency, it would have taken us a lot of time. So to me, I share that long-winded story, and that is because I increasingly hear people talk about, well, technology is nice, but, well, we don't really need it with these individuals. Or, that's great, but we won't introduce that technology until later. And I'm thinking, well, no, especially for individuals with intellectual disabilities. If you want to develop that independence, if you want to develop that capacity, we need to do it now. Now, one last image I want to share with you, and then we'll get into some other specifics, is the car, the Google car. And I'm not sure if you've seen this, but of course some of you have heard Uber, the taxi service, has been doing personaless cars in Pittsburgh for now the better part of 6 months. Google, of course, has been driverless cars for the better part of a couple of years. BMW, Mercedes, GM are all working in this area. Now, I bring this up because in terms of transition, in terms of life independence, in terms of being able to get to point A to point B, I truly believe by the time Nolan's 28, now he's 16 now, so I'd say by the time he's 26, the next 10 years, he'll have that option of being able to be in a driverless car and no longer be dependent upon myself, my wife, or potentially a complicated public system, transportation system, and allow for that independence. Technology not developed for Nolan, and yet technology Nolan could utilize. And that's why I want to emphasize one last time, a lot of these technologies we're talking about are not necessarily technologies developed for the Nolans of the world, for individuals with Down syndrome, and yet technologies that could very much be applicable. So with that thought, let's kind of move on. Now, my moving on here is actually for us. And I'm going to take a step back. So I talked about some technologies that are wearable, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. I talked about the Google car, and you're like, yeah, Sean, that's way far off. But I want to talk about some other technologies you can use tomorrow. But before we get there, I want to talk about a couple different technology sites, websites, that are very relevant to our needs as stakeholders supporting individuals with Down syndrome. And one is the Transition Coalition. Now, if you're unfamiliar with it, the Transition Coalition, it's one of the resources I have off the Google Doc, and I'll share that with you in just a bit. That's the same Google Doc I offered at the beginning of this presentation. But the Transition Coalition is actually out of the University of Kansas. So yes, I am preaching a product or advertising a product here, but honestly it's known internationally for its work to support individuals trying to better understand transition elements, parents, community providers, both post-secondary as well as grade level, school level, about the issues of transition. And so I'm going to get to it in just a second, but let me give you some screenshots. They have a number of different tools, assessments, resources, and training modules. So tools, assessments, resources, and training modules to assist individuals thinking about transition and how to support an individual to transition. So for example, some of the online modules, everything from best practices to transition assessment, to working with families, to enhancing employment outcomes, to transition for youth with emotional behavioral challenges, and there's a whole list of other things that go on. And then when you get deep into these modules people take for credit, but you can also take as an individual just independently, and I'll show you that in just a moment. They're very, very thorough. Now, the case specifics, for example, this is about Marie, who's 18, and she's an individual with a cognitive disability, senior in high school. This is what she's planning to do. But they offer the case to contextualize, to situate what it is then that has a lot of other elements, everything from the legal aspect to supports that are available, to assessments to use, to resources to apply. Okay, and this is another one in terms of working with families. So let me go back here real quick, and I think I have a link off of this one to just take us over to the Transition Coalition. The Transition Coalition is free, and you can create your own login. And so I have one right over here. You'll see login on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, when you log in, I just click, I created that myself, and now it allows you to go into my modules. So you have a series of modules. So for example, I'm 2% into the best practice module. So I'm going to continue working on this module. It's free, and you'll see it has a number of different issues. So for example, in this one, the transition one is everything about the law and what transition services are, which is great, which, by the way, for a parent now working with transition, this has been very helpful to me to go talk to the schools, because one of the things I've advocated for is, well, we need to transition folks at the meetings. Well, who's Sean? Well, let's have these individuals. And what's the requirement? We need to develop a transition plan. What's a transition plan? Well, they talk about appropriate transition assessments. They talk about services here. They talk about how to put it into the IEP. Here you go for measurable goals. So these are all very useful things actually for me to then communicate back to my team. But of course, team members could be identified with this and educated on this, as are folks out there in the community trying to help with that transition process. Now this happens to be a module on the basic overview of transition, but as I mentioned before, there's some on families, there's some on assessment tools, and again, you walk through step by step. They offer you specifics. So for example, here's one for an individual by the name of Chase. He's another individual that's a case study, and they basically give you examples of what it would look like. And they're telling you about indicator 13 here, and you actually can see yes or no, and they give you feedback on that appropriateness. So I could spend all day on the Transition Coalition. I will not, beyond the fact that I want you to be aware that they have products and materials. So here's, under the Resource Hub, a number of different products and materials. And here's one on, for example, getting around on transportation and teaching that. Here's one on independent living. Here's one on going on to college, which increasingly is an option for individuals with intellectual disabilities, particularly individuals with Down syndrome. My son hopefully will be going to KU in the future. There's a lot of programs throughout the country. So there are a number of different resources to consider. So that's the Transition Coalition, and I share the Transition Coalition as a resource for us to better understand the application of transition for individuals we're working with. Now another resource for us that I want to reinforce is out of autism, but it's a phenomenal resource, and they're called the Autism Internet Modules. And again, I have this up on our Google Doc. I have a link there. I'll reinforce that when we get to that. But the Autism Internet Modules were created for, yes, individuals with autism. And they have a host of different things. As you can see here, autism in the home, autism in the classroom. But take a look at this, autism in the workplace. So autism in the classroom deals with transition issues, as does autism in the workplace. So does it apply to Down syndrome and intellectual disabilities? You bet, yeah, it certainly does. And it's a nice connection. And so just FYI on that. Now, let me share with you what I'm talking about in terms of the modules. So for example, well, that's just a screen to get us there. Here's an introductory to a module on preparing for employment. Now, Randy Lewis, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty certain Randy Lewis has a child with autism. But Randy is also the senior vice president, or was, for Walgreens. And so here's a module on preparing for employment, and Walgreens has been known nationally for their adult programs to employ individuals, particularly with autism, up there in the Chicagoland area. So who better than to have someone who's actually doing it to talk you through how it can be done and what's the possibilities. And so this is part of the module. And then the module walks through everything from case studies to examples to visuals and movies to walk you through. This is all free under the Autism Internet Modules. Here's a case study on Sal, kind of similar to the case study on Marie and Chase that we just saw in the Transition Coalition. This is separate. This is the Autism Internet Modules. Both of them are free services. And then what I like about the Autism Internet Modules is that here's, for example, a checklist for visual schedules, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But basically, this is a tool that's available right off the Autism Internet Modules to download and use for free. So at that end of the modules about getting ready for employment, they'll have various checklists and various assessment tools and various resources you download and you can utilize tomorrow. So it's a great way for us to better understand how to support in the transition process. Sean, are these technology tools? Not necessarily, but the tool itself, the Autism Internet Modules and the Transition Coalition, are web-based resources, and that's what I wanted to emphasize for you folks to be thinking about. So those are both free, Autism Internet Modules and Transition Coalition, and they're off the Google Doc for the like. Okay, so I'm going to move over now to tools. Not a good, that was a very poor transition, Sean. Well, I want to now talk about what I know you're here for, and that is, Sean, what are some technology tools to help individuals doing some of the elements of transition? And Sean, let's get beyond just post-secondary, and I will in just a moment. As we think about this, I want to emphasize several tools out there. Now, I talked about some wearable technologies, which I believe, and let me go off on that for just one more moment in terms of wearable technologies. I mentioned the iPhone with Nolan, but another wearable technology Nolan uses is a Fitbit. So one of the things that many of us, it was what, the Christmas present 2 years ago. I actually was behind the times and gave it to my wife this year, and I was really cautious about, okay, I'm giving my wife a Fitbit for Christmas, what am I telling her? But she was very appreciative, and she wears it all the time. But Nolan wears a Fitbit, and we had thought about that, but we're trying to get Nolan to think about, from an independent skill, what do you eat, Nolan? How much do you eat? Let's control that eating component. Let's select in terms of when you eat off at school, at the lunch, which we're not there to watch. What types of food, and Nolan we have to worry about in terms of his choking. If he eats too much and too fast, he tends to choke. The other thing is, as a 16-year-old, we're thinking when he's 22, 23, 24, independently, are you going to be eating just pizza all day, or are you going to be more aware of your eating? And so the Fitbit actually has been one part of several tools to have him think about his diet and have him think about eating. And actually, he's lost weight wearing the Fitbit. And the Fitbit, as you know, allows you to record the number of steps you take. And so Nolan's shooting for 10,000 per day. It's amazing how fast you can get to 10,000. But it also gives that reinforcer. You can set that at different times. It'll buzz and shake when he reaches that. Of course, it works as his clock, and we're trying to work with him on time. That's another transition, another functional skill we're trying to adapt to. It then also, as most Fitbits do, they then apply back to a tablet or to a computer. His syncs automatically with his iPad, which he uses for school for educational purposes, but the iPad tracks his progress, and it's very visual. And so he's able to see it, although he doesn't understand numbers, he's very poor in math, he sees his progress in color and how it's moving down in terms of weight and up in terms of his health. And then, of course, we're using something that goes along with a Fitbit for his menu and his schedules. And so we're combining a number of different apps that he'll use, all via kind of the connector, or the carrot for him has been the Fitbit, so that wearable technology. Now, why do I have Google Drive up here? Well, educationally, another element for us in terms of transition has been to promote his independence, and at the secondary level, one of it is what happens at school and how do we communicate between school and home, and how do we allow you to facilitate it, Nolan, and Google Drive is a great place to do it. So Nolan does have a computer. His district is a 1-to-1, but he had a computer before it went 1-to-1, meaning one computer per student. But he doesn't need his own computer. All he needs is access to Google Drive, and that's where he'll put up assignments. That's where he'll put up homework. That's where his parent will put notes. That's where his teacher will put notes. That's where we'll put information. That's where we'll put video up. We'll put pictures up. No one will put pictures up. And it will all be stored in different folders to be able to facilitate that interaction between home, school, and increasingly work in terms of where he's working as well. And so we're all kind of sharing that as a repository. So when we're introducing Nolan through a lot of resources sitting for free on a Google Drive to allow people to know who Nolan is and what his independence is. And again, we're able to understand what's happening at school while promoting his independence through what's being provided to us via Google Drive. Another popular tool for that is called Live Binders. Live Binders is free, and a number of educators use this to provide information about resources, homework, assignments, things of that nature. And to us, it allows Nolan to be more independent, more like his siblings when it comes to recording and organizing this information, but it allows us to also have a window into that and have a connection between that, and it's all housed in one area. And it's getting him organized and comfortable with the technology that will allow him to schedule and things of that nature as he gets older. So Google Drive and Live Binder allow him to do both those, and that's between school and home. And honestly, we introduced Google Drive back when he was in middle school. We would have introduced it in elementary school if it had been around. We think it's a great technology because it's free and you really can put anything in there. And it holds a lot of information, and you don't need your own device. You just need something at home and something at school, and it houses it in between that. All right, so let's talk about some additional tools. And when we talk about some additional tools, I don't have time to really go into this, but any tool I think of for my son, and for the individuals I work with Down syndrome, I always think of it from the framework of universal design for learning. And folks, I am compressing a day's worth of information into an hour. So it's a bit choppy, I apologize. But I want to make sure we're getting to as much as we can. And so, for example, to me, that wearable technology, it's giving him, from a universal design perspective, no one's getting prompts visually, no one's getting prompts physically, where it actually shakes on his wrist. I'm actually holding my wrist right now. He gets the prompt where he's wearing it. He gets to look at it regularly for that prompt as well. And it actually interacts with his iPad, which allows for multiple means of representation. And he's able to demonstrate what he's doing because it records his steps, and he can share with others, hey, look at this. I got my 10,000 steps today. Demonstrating it without him having to record it. It records it automatically. Very free, very universal. And so universal design for learning has three principles. It is a framework used amongst educators and professionals today, and it's something that is going to become more relevant as it's being required as part of the new ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, which replaced No Child Left Behind. But if you're unfamiliar with it, the three principles are, when you think of tech, and I'm going to use it for technology's sake, when you think of technology tools, make sure that they're flexible in representation. Make sure it's just not text-based. Make sure the comprehension allows for lots of flexibility, because individuals with intellectual disabilities or Down syndrome will be challenged with being able to comprehend certain elements or tools or signs or symbols. But if you give lots of options, they'll have more of an ability. You need to give an individual a tool that gives them flexibility to express what they know. And it may just be beyond simply text. So instead of interacting it with text, it may be verbal. But then again, a lot of our individuals with Down syndrome have verbal skill limitations. So you may be giving me another option to be able to express myself besides the verbal as well. I'll give you some examples here in just a moment. And the third principle of UDL is make sure it's engaging to the individual. If it recruits and sustains their interest and also allows them to be independent and self-regulate, wow, just think what's possible with that individual. So when I think of technology tools and apps and things of that nature, I tend to concentrate on the UDL framework, and I look for tools that offer these three elements, these three principles. Okay, with that said, let's pop into a few. Now here's an app that allows me to think about my schedule. Now look at it from a UDL perspective. It gives me images. For example, that get dressed is a picture of myself getting dressed. It allows me to put in symbols. It allows me to put in simple text. It allows me to structure it. And by the way, some of these apps allow me to select it and actually see a video of what it means to get dressed. So First Then Visual Schedule is a very popular app, very popular in the Down syndrome community, very popular in the autism community, and it allows me to organize my schedule from a day's perspective. It works on a mobile device, generally it's there for an iPad or a tablet or an iPhone, and it allows me from a transition perspective. First of all, I need to kind of be more self-directed. I need to be able to understand what I need to do. It needs to be represented beyond just the traditional schedule like a calendar that's often offered in an elementary, middle, secondary setting. That's very restrictive. It generally is only text only. It generally is fairly fine print. It includes the entire year. Well, this just is one day or potentially the entire week. So anyways, visual schedule and visual schedules themselves are very powerful tools, very positive to the individual that's intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome, autism, because they tend to be visual learners. All right, so there's an app to consider. Another app that goes along with the same idea is something called Visual Impact Pro. And Visual Impact Pro allows me to basically have a host of different things to do in relationship to tasks associated with what I need to do. So for example, everything from maybe a morning task is to make coffee, to my lunch task to make salad, to I'm learning about Abraham Lincoln. So Visual Impact Pro is another app that hosts a number of different things I'm trying to learn or I need to remember to learn. I select each one of these and it takes me down to the task. So for example, make a PBJ sandwich. I select that and it'll break down, it'll take me to a screen that will break down the steps. It will offer some visuals of those steps. It will even offer some video of those steps. And so it allows me to take this visual schedule like this, expands upon it, and actually uses elements of video modeling. And we'll get to that here in just a moment. So a number of apps should be, for transition purposes, is allowing the individual to be more controlling of their schedule, to be more independent and understanding of that. And in all honesty, folks, there are apps that allow me to do that in first grade, in kindergarten, in preschool. And it may be simply that it's lunchtime. What is the sequence of lunch? Or does breakfast come before lunch? Or what takes place? When do I go out on the playground? And that we use visual schedules, and we use visual schedules for years with individuals early on. We use it as a communication device to sequence from a language perspective for cause and effect in terms of if this takes place, then what follows. So schedules are across age levels, across grade levels, and they've been used in a variety of different ways. Well, the technology really allows you to ramp it up. It not only gives you the schedule, but it gives you the task associated with it, visuals, prompts, and how to actually do it. So can't reinforce a variety of different visual schedules. Now, I also want to talk about kind of global other types of tools and technologies. One company I want to talk about is the Attainment Company. I just want to simply leave it here as that the Attainment Company has developed a number of different tools in collaboration with another company called AbleLink Technologies. So for example, Visual Impact Pro is from AbleLink Technologies, which is great for intellectual disabilities. AbleLink Technologies, and that's right here. Attainment Company has collaborated with the AbleLink Technologies to create a number of resources for adaptive living functional skills. So everything from living safely to independent living, budgeting, shopping, clothing, schedules. There are apps and different element supports to walk an individual through these components. I'll just leave it there. I don't have time enough to get into it in great detail. I just want you to know it's a great resource to consider. And what they do is, and why is it a great resource? They create an area that's of relevance, but they also have done it thinking of individuals with intellectual disabilities, which is really relevant. So the language, the images, and all that are very much aligned with the needs of that population. And I am jumping because of time. I'd love to, for example, spend a lot of time on the visual schedules. I'd like to spend more time on companies that create, but I mentioned a couple. The other resource I do want to mention, I'm not spending enough time on it, is the idea of more of the visual, so in terms of expenses and other things in terms of software for budgeting. So this is something called Expense Tracker. Now Expense Tracker allows you to work through saving and allows you to work with money. Now it's not necessarily the be-end and end-all. I offer it as one example because to me increasingly I believe this idea of teaching money. For example, Nolan, we've been trying to teach the difference between a quarter and a dime for years, and $1 and $5. It's been very difficult. So how much more time do we waste on that versus thinking about the fact that he has a mobile phone? Can he use the mobile phone and that app, even though it's several years old? So now these mobile devices are getting fairly inexpensive. Of course, the monthly plan is a cost, but now I can actually go and pay right there at Target with my mobile device. I simply, or with my credit card, but I can pay with my mobile device as well. So now I'm not teaching number sense so much as I'm teaching the process of using credit and using your cards or using your phone to go and make that purchase. I'm taking money actually out of it so I don't have to worry about changes provided and all that, and then potentially I have it housed in something like this, although this is a little bit more complex, but something allows me to somewhat budget or summarize my money and my savings. I might do that with another stakeholder that provides me that support, but where I'm trying to get at is the electronic aspect of money is now replacing the need to potentially learn and be taught very complex elements of money, but I can still learn to use and purchase, and the process of going out in the community and being independent when I shop and things of that nature. So something to consider. I'm not doing this justice, again, because of time. I at least want us to get you thinking. I'll actually leave this slide with a point that we've shifted now. Our focus with Nolan is when you go to the store and you're trying to be independent, or you go to the movie theater, you're trying to be independent, how does that process work? What's the steps? What do you make sure you need to have, how do you get the receipt, et cetera, so that he's able then to independently potentially maneuver around and make purchases. So there's a number of others though. So if you're interested though in learning about coins and dollars, there's a number of programs. I have a link here off the Google Doc that walks you through a program that deals with coins and dollars. There's another one called Next Dollar Up that walks you through in terms of money management. Next Dollar Up offers some support in terms of that management of money, besides the concept of money as well, but it does that. Now, Looktel Money Reader, of course, that technology was advanced for individuals who are blind, but the beauty of that is I can take the app, I can select over a dollar, and it will tell me is that $1 versus $5. So that is something I'm increasingly seeing people with Down syndrome use, so they understand, okay, I need to have $5. Oh, this is $5 versus $10 versus $1 for individuals that have difficulty with that concept. It will read it out loud as soon as you flash the app with the device that you use has to have the app and, of course, a camera. And then, of course, it records and tells you what the actual the dollar, the coin is. Okay? And, of course, there's Apple Pay, as I mentioned a moment ago. And Apple Pay allows for you to interact with a lot of devices. I know Target, Walmart, and others are becoming very almost universal in their ability to use something like Apple Pay with your device, your mobile device. All right, let's shift over here because of time. There's also some tools, and I'll actually get to this in just a second. But there's tools like everyday social skills, and social skills, of course, in terms of everything from learning to use a restroom, to waiting in line, to how I go about interacting with another individual. Social competency and social skills are critical. Well, there's a number of apps that do that, but I want to share with you some other examples here in just a moment that go beyond that as well. But so I just talked about money. I'm going to talk here about social skills for a moment. I'm going to talk about in terms of behavior and elements of interacting with others here in just a moment as well. So again, that compression of a day into an hour. I apologize if I'm being too choppy. But there's a number of apps out there for social skills. There's a number of apps out there in terms of just functional life elements. Being safe. What do you do at a bus stop? What do you do in terms of interacting with a cashier and receipt? Now, these are elements the entertainment company does, and there's other systems. This is called the Functional Life Skills System. This is, again, a link off the Google Doc that will walk you through elements of this. So again, I know I'm going fairly fast, but there's a number of different technology programs an individual can watch. Now, a number of these are video-based, and so they actually watch the video. Let me see if I can go to this one real quick. So this one here is the Conover online, and literally will walk an individual through all sorts of different skills, and a lot of this is they'll sit on your iPad or on your computer, by the way, and as you can see here, the little videos, and they'll walk the individual through what to do through this sequence and through this scenario. And there's a number of different ones that do this. Now, this is for pay, but the big thing is these video elements, the kind of video modeling of what to do. Now, I want to use that in just a moment here, but to be thinking about that, there's a number of products that do that. All right, Model Me Going Places is another one. This tends to be focused on younger children, so it's a great idea for social skill development, but also modeling. It's a great thing to introduce early on for individuals for everything from the transition skills that, okay, I didn't need to do this when I was 3 or 4, but now I need to do this as a 5 or 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. This is typical behavior. Well, I'm learning it from video models, which is a great technology to continue to learn throughout my adult life. And here it's more appropriate to the peer in terms of the age of the model, the actor, and a number of different resources that go along with this. Again, this is primarily video-based. It's called Model Me Going Places, taking social skills, taking the functional skills, and beyond. But there's also games, and I'm not sure if you've taken a look at this, but this is a urinal game, and this is an app. It's a simple little game. It's actually, there's apps for this, and there's also some free websites, and I've given you both. But this is, how do you select the correct urinal? And you're thinking, okay, Sean, this is a little peculiar. But actually, if you talk to most guys, if this is a guy thing, I can't tell you about the girl thing, but the guy thing, if there's 5 urinals, here there's 6, there's an etiquette. You don't go to the middle one, you go to the far one. And if someone's there at the far one, then we go to the opposite far one. And if 2 people are at the opposite far one, you go to the middle one. And if there's people that are right next door, where do you go? Well, maybe you go over to the bathroom where the little door, what am I looking for, word-wise? I go to the toilet. And I'm being a little silly here, but the idea is that these apps are teaching skills that many individuals would argue are the hidden curriculum elements. And so, for example, with Nolan, when he was younger, going into the restroom, he saw that as a social experience. He saw that as a fooling around. He didn't understand some of the elements there. He didn't understand in terms of the proximity. And how do you teach that? Well, you're not going to learn that with your physical therapist or your occupational therapist. They'll teach you how to zip and button your pants. They won't teach you what to do in the bathroom. So how do you learn some of those elements that are so critical for those transition elements as you get older? As an aside, and if any of you parents in terms of the buttoning and zipping, I remember that was such a big focus because if I went into the boys' room, I could quickly figure out who Nolan was because all the boys were facing the urinals, and the boy that was Nolan was the one that I could see his bottom because he pulled his pants down in order to use it. The rest of the boys had figured out the zipper and the button. So, but anyways, games like this that are really, really helpful. And then, of course, there's a number of different video elements that go along with combining games that are app-based that allow for everything from employment preparation. This is a timer app to allow me to conceptualize this idea of time, understand there's transitions to go along with time, what I'm supposed to do while things are in the red area, what I'm supposed to do with things that are in the broader white area. Okay, now I do want to get into video editing, but before I do that, I want to get over to our Google Doc. And let me go back to let me show you how to grab that Google Doc. So let me go over here, and I'm just simply going to go back to our front page. And there's that URL I mentioned. There it is again. So it's goo.gl/4, and then capital G, which actually I don't think it's case sensitive, GA50N, so 4GA50N. I'm just simply going to copy and paste that into a new browser window, and this is the one I have for us today, okay? Now, there's a lot of different resources here, but the part I want to scroll down to is I've been talking about apps. I've been quickly talking about apps. I've jumped from everything from wearables to social skills to functional skills to time to visual schedules. Well, I want to come down here and talk about finding the right app. And to me, this is a critical tool. And that is, if I'm looking for apps and I want to look for transition apps, I'm not going to go to Google. It's going to come up with millions of hits, and they're not going to all be apps. I'm not going to go to the App Store because the App Store is literally searching through hundreds of thousands of apps. They have over 1 million apps. I'm not going to go up under education because honestly, transition may not be housed under education. So instead, I'm going to try to find some additional tools. So for example, one of the apps I like is literally the autism app. And I have this linked off my Google Drive, my Google Doc. I'm not exactly sure where it is, so I just figured I'd go right to it. But this is an app that literally organizes apps under the area of autism. And you're like, well, Sean, we're talking Down syndrome. Yeah, but actually it is, as it says, special needs. And so they've actually organized apps that they've identified out there in the app world specific to transition. So this is an app itself. So download the autism app. It's free. You download the autism app, and then you can search on the autism app for transition apps, employment apps, post-secondary apps. I can't recall what the terminology they use. I know they use employment, and I'm pretty certain they use transition, but they also use social skills. So you can find apps using the autism app. All right. Now, there's other sites out there, and here, let me go to Bridging Apps. I like Bridging Apps. Bridging Apps is a website, and what they've done is, look at this. They have basically taken the tens or hundreds of thousands of apps and identified 3,590 apps. But if you haven't noticed, they basically say for technology with people with disabilities. And they have a tool here. And the tool, finding an app, allows you to, and it always takes a minute or two for it to load. So I can go up under my app list, okay? But here's my visual schedule planner. There's another app for visual schedulers, okay? But what I can do is I can actually search. So I can type in here, and let's type in transition. So I'll type in transition. And there's the dollar and cents. There's a symbol support. Oh, here's my health and my choice. I dress for weather, which is a critical one. I don't know about you, but Nolan, I could tell Nolan it's 75 and sunny today, which actually in Lawrence, Kansas it is. And Nolan will come down with long sleeve pants, long sleeve shirt, and want to wear a sweatshirt. Why? Because that's what he's feeling like wearing today. But they basically have identified a number of apps. There's that first send schedule. Here's choice making, okay? I dress for weather. These are all things they aligned for transition. Now you're like, well, wait a minute. How does Prolo courses align me for speech? Well, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Well, there's a Go Pass for transportation for transition. But I wanted something a little bit more specific. Well, I can review under, well, let's not worry about status. I can review under category, meaning, well, wait, what area of category am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for things that align along the lines of life skills, okay? So I'll minimize that, and you notice my search just changed over here. And then I'm going to look under age, and I'm going to say, well, Nolan is 16, but you know he operates more as a 13-year-old, so I'll just say he's a 13-year-old, and I'm willing to pay up to $10. So let's go up here in terms of 10, and then skill-wise, and as you notice, this is changing over here as I make my searches. So what Bridging App has done is they've given you a tool to, yes, search for transition, and by the way, that may be the wrong word, and then you can modify that with these different categories to really narrow things down. Now remember, they're only looking for 3,500 apps, so you're not looking for every app in the book, okay? So there's a number of other apps, other places I like to find apps. So for example, Kindertown, this is more educational, but Kindertown allows me to say age. Well, I'm looking for 7 to 8. So let's say this is more transition or some of the skills I need to develop as I transition. I can look under the iPad or anything. I can look under, let's say, all, and then I can start searching, okay? So I can search apps here. It'll give me a list. I can type in my area here, which transition is probably not the best word for my example here, but I'll just use it. But notice up under here, not only the age, but now I can go up under math in terms of content, language arts, art, you name it. And as I select those, the list of apps will change. So again, it's another way of finding apps. This is 207, way too many. The more I limit my search, the more it will narrow down the number of apps. And so it's another tool to find apps. And I urge you to use these types of resources. It will save you time, it will save you aggravation, and it will allow you to get to those apps that you're really looking for. Now, there are other tools out there that I'll just suggest, and I want to move on to a couple other things, and we're really reduced in time. But Pinterest is phenomenal. So I'm working, if you come to this thinking, Sean, I'm thinking about apps that help me transition at the early childhood age or the early elementary. Pinterest, special needs, early childhood, elementary, phenomenal links, phenomenal resources. There's a lot of parents out there providing lots of different links and resources to consider. So Pinterest is excellent. And then there's a number of other resources I've identified here that I believe do a really nice job of kind of contextualizing apps that will be relevant. And again, you guys have to decide what terminology you're going to use, functional skills, life skills, transition, things of that nature. Great way of finding apps. I can't urge you enough to consider those. Now, the last thing I want to share with you as I kind of quickly move through today is back to apps, but apps specifically for some of the things we just talked about, and that is to elements of showing you what to do. So, for example, there are apps that literally you can create the sequence of making your breakfast and take real images of the steps in your own kitchen, put those together, and next thing you know, your app allows you to then, as the individual wakes up in the morning, oh, I have to make my lunch. How do I make my lunch? Or a sequence of events, how do I behave in recess? Or how do I go about doing this independent work in this carol that they've organized for me, or in this station at this elementary class? Or how do I do this 6 steps in the hair salon that I'm working with, and I'm trying to learn a skill to potentially work there independently? Or going from my home to the bus stop, what are the steps I follow and what direction do I follow? There's a number of videos that have been created, that can be created, that are powerful in terms of developing and teaching that skill. So I share that with you because a number of apps have already applied that. But some of those apps you may say, well, Sean, those aren't covering what I need. I want to create my own apps. Well, there's a number of apps that allow me, I want to create my own video. Well, there's a number of apps that allow me to do that. So, for example, Animoto. It's free for educators up to, I think it's 60 seconds. There's a pay. This is a website and an app. There's a website, but it's also an app. And by the way, Animoto allows me to take still pictures, combine them, put in audio that I record or music, and then it creates a video for me. So I make a video out of still images. Pretty cool. Screencastify. Screencastify sits on your web browser. So here I am. I'm on my web browser. It's called Screencastify. It's free. I put it here on my Chrome browser. It is a Chrome browser app, if you're familiar with that idea. I simply click my Chrome browser app, And then I can simply say, well, I want a video. I want to record the desktop. It says which desktop. I want to record the entire screen. I simply
2, 1.
And now it's starting to record, and it will record my voice and this desktop. So I can go between screens, and it will actually record that. And so I'm here. I'm going to go up under Screencastify. I'm going to end my recording, and it'll automatically save it and watch. And now it's starting to record, and it will record my voice and this desktop. So I can go between screens, and it will actually record that. And so I'm here. That's an app called Screencastify. So I can actually video on my screen and then edit off that video to any type of resource I want to provide to individuals I'm working for. Camtasia allows to do that. And by the way, you can also record a camera so you can actually see the person and edit that as well. Apple iMovie is free on your tablet. It's free on your, iPad. It's free on your phone. And you can edit images and video that you create. And let me give you one example, and BrainPop allows for, I don't have time to talk about BrainPop, I'm sorry. But let me give you an example of what Nolan did in recording off of his desktop for a transition element actually back at middle school. Now this is something Nolan created, and I helped him. We created some PowerPoint slides, and then we recorded this using what's called Camtasia, which is on our computer. That app, I can't recall the price of the app. The software is about $100, but it's really good. But Screencastify could have done the same thing for free. Now Screencastify is a little harder to use for Nolan. Camtasia he's learned to use, and that's why we decided to bite the bullet, but he uses it regularly. But I give this example because this is an example of what Nolan did to help when he transitioned from 5th grade to middle school. And he transitioned to middle school, and honestly the middle school teachers didn't know him. I'd argue some of them were afraid of him, and they didn't think he belonged in his class. And so a social studies teacher, about 3 weeks in, was ready to tell me, sorry, the Nolans of the world I've never worked with, 20-odd years, I'm a veteran, and so we had to show the teacher that Nolan was learning, but he wasn't learning that where he could share it via the worksheet. So instead, and he didn't have time to present. They wouldn't give him time to present. So instead, he created this little movie. And this little movie was simply an organization of ideas that we created in PowerPoint. He recorded it and sent it to her via email, and I tell you, 48 hours later, she was a believer. But here's an example.
Thank you for watching my presentation on Lewis and Clark. You are about to watch a slide show about the Lewis and Clark expedition. In 1830, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson.
Now, Nolan practices speech with this. I mean, I don't know how many times we recorded this on this one because this is one of his first ones, but we really wanted to make sure that he was practicing a speech so he could hear himself, he could listen to himself. But equally important, it was to share that I'm learning this, I'm understanding this. Now, we did this together, so it did take a little time. But after a while, Nolan learned that with elements that he could put together, I helped him a little bit at home, just like I help all my children with their homework. And then we record it and send it to the teacher, which was sharing what Nolan knew instead of a worksheet, instead of an essay, and instead of a presentation, which she didn't have time for. And honestly, she became his biggest advocate in middle school after this first example. So, and that's an example with the video, so a lot of different things. Now I've covered a lot in this session. I hope I've touched upon some of the things that you came to the session for. I hope that. If not, there's my email address. Feel free to email me. Anything you have, I'll try. You just have to give me a little context, and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try to connect you with a resource or someone that does know. And of course, that's the website for the Google Doc that provides all the resources I've mentioned, as well as many more that I have not mentioned, but that they're hopefully for your assistance. So I'll bring it back over to you, Vanessa, and I know I've given no time for questions, but I hope this has been helpful.
Well, Sean, I think it's been really, really helpful. Thank you for this phenomenal presentation. Everybody out there, it's been recorded, and the slides will be posted on the National Down Syndrome Society's website, www.ndsf.org. And Sean, thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. Everybody, have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye now.